Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity, your recovery-focused podcast with your host, Keegan. Today, I'm joined with a returning friend of the show, Jackie Baxter. Jackie is a breathing instructor and coach who has navigated the invisible, often gaslit trenches of long COVID. Today, we're going deeper into the soul of recovery. Here's the question that I got for you, Jackie, right off the bat. If your body is the vessel and the breath is the wind, what do you do when the wind stops blowing? And in a society addicted to more, how do we finally learn the language of enough?
I wish I knew. It's tough, isn't it? I mean, I have this constant search for enough. Like, I didn't even understand the concept of enough until a few years ago. Well, probably more than a few years ago, when I got ill and had to start kind of working my way through it. And as a recovering perfectionist who didn't even realize she was a perfectionist, and then when she did realize that she was a perfectionist, she didn't think it was a bad thing. I then realized that not only was I a terrible perfectionist, but also how unhealthy that can be when it takes over every aspect of your life. And this was pushing me to push my body to, limits that it couldn't sustain. Being a perfectionist wasn't the only reason that I got sick in the first place, but it was a driver for sure. And it was also something that kind of kept me stuck because I was trying to do recovery perfectly, which is impossible. Yeah. And I think, then going deeper and deeper, it was realizing that actually perfection is impossible. Like nothing is ever going to be perfect. And the more we try to be perfect, the more unsatisfied with things we're going to be, because we're never going to make it to this perfection. So when I realized that, I thought, wow, that was a bit of a light bulb moment for me, kind of understanding that this thing that I was striving for, that I had spent my entire life striving for and pushing myself towards, was something that I was never, ever going to reach. It's the mountain that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Except at least you know that it will get there eventually, whereas perfection, you won't. So I thought, okay, well, great. I need to stop trying to be so perfect. But, you can't just flip a switch. And, perfectionism, I think, often is a trauma response. You have been made to feel like you're not enough, whether that was consciously or unconsciously. But, I think that was the thing. I had never been told that I was enough. I'd never felt enough. Therefore, I was constantly trying to be more and pushing myself towards this, holy grail of perfection that didn't exist. So this kind of realization was great. But then, okay, well, I realized that this is a thing. What on earth do I do about it? I was like, I don't know. Tell you what, maybe I should get myself a therapist, which was one of the greatest decisions I made. But this, thing about enough, I had never done something that was enough. I'd blown so far past enough that it was like, in the dust back there somewhere. So it was like, okay, well, what is enough? How does enough feel like? Because I realize, a long way past it, but I don't know it when I'm there. I only realize what it was when it's long gone. And this therapist that I mentioned, who is one of the most amazing people I've ever met, I asked her this. I said, what is enough? And she said, when it stops being fun.
Ooh. Oh.
Mic drop.
Oh. So what was that switch for you?
So, I mean, it wasn't easy because, when you're doing a thing, you're working on a project, you're editing a podcast episode, you're doing a painting, whatever it is that you're doing, or maybe it's work that maybe you're not enjoying that much. So you think, well, how do I know when this stops being fun? Because it's not fun to start with. But you're doing a painting or you're doing something creative, You know, they're both creatives, you know.
Yeah.
You know, that point of it stop being fun, that's where you're looking for errors. You know, you're thinking about other people rather than yourself, maybe. You know, again, you know, creativity, particularly when you're a professional. But I think even if you're not, it can come in. But I think particularly if you're a professional, you know, my background is I'm a professional musician, you know, and I thought perfectionism made me a better musician. And, you know, on some level it maybe did, but it took over in an unhealthy way. And, you know, I think, you know, we should create for ourselves first and foremost. I think we should do everything for ourselves first and foremost. You know, coming back to the, you know, put your own oxygen mask on first. You know, I think we should always be starting from a position of ourselves. But, you know, we often, you know, in that sort of creativity or work, even, you know, any sort of work, probably we're doing it with the boss on our shoulder, or, you know, our audience on our shoulder, or, you know, whoever it is that's going to be consuming what you're doing. We tend to think so much more about what they think before thinking about what actually feels right. So it's that kind of like, can we start from the position of being authentically ourselves, and then, if appropriate, start to bring in, okay, right, well, you know, if I'm going to do a podcast, you know, I probably do want an audience. So it's that. I mean, I have a friend who's a book editor, and I'm writing a book.
Yay!
And I was asking her some advice, and she said, write for yourself, edit it for your audience. Which I thought was really great, because, you know, my tendency would be to rush in and think, right, what do people want? And I think, you know, again, you know, when you're doing something that's going to be consumed by others, that has to be a factor. But once you've kind of decided sort of what you're doing, do it for you, refine it for others. But coming back to what is enough, you know, it's that thing, isn't it? Do it for you. Do it for you first and foremost. And when it stops feeling like you, or when you stop being inspired by it, or you feel like you're kind of just running the hamster wheel, or it's not being fun, you're getting frustrated with it, you know, that's the point where you're, you know, I mean, you know, put it away and go and have a cup of tea. You know, and then come back to it. And if you're still feeling that, you know, maybe it's time to let it go. So I think it's that kind of thing of, you know, what was the question? What is enough? You know, I think so much of the time we strive for more, whereas I think often what we need is less. Less controlling, less pushing, less trying, less, you know, all of these things, and actually less, you know, less stuff, less thinking, more feeling, less pushing, you know. And but, you know, the world tells us the opposite, doesn't it? Society tells us that if you're sitting doing nothing, then you're being lazy and you should be trying harder, and, you know, all of these things. And I think it took me being sick for quite a lot of years and having to kind of, you know, fight my way out to actually realize that actually I wasn't fighting my way out. I was letting go of all of the stuff that wasn't me. So coming back to that, you know, more versus less, actually a lot of the time, rather than bringing new stuff in, new habits, new this, new that, you know, new medications, new supplements, you know, new whatever, actually, let's go back to basics. Let's get rid of all of the stuff you don't need. And see what's left. And then it may be that after that you want to, you know, spice it up a little bit, but let's let go of the crap. And see what's there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And you just got back from a mountain. I don't remember the name of it. And you were saying that whenever you have this time to yourself, you're kind of like, ooh, I should go do this new thing, but you're going back to the mountain that you know, that you're familiar with, right? Is it kind of like that?
Yeah, and that's interesting because I hadn't noticed that at all. That's amazing that you picked that up, and you're totally right. You know, when I'm on my own, which I have been this weekend, my partner's been away. I could have gone anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
literally. Well, within reason, I
Yeah.
could have gone anywhere,
Uh-huh.
and when the weather is good, which it was this weekend, you know, I'm hard pushed to go anywhere other than Torridon. It's one of my favorite places. It's got my favorite mountain in it, and my favorite mountain has my favorite quarry, and it has my favorite loch, and it's one of my favorite walks. It's called Ben A, and the
Okay.
quarry it's Quarry McPherker, and it's got this massive triple buttress, and it was all covered in snow. The loch was iced over. It was just it was magic. It was just magic. And I do find myself totally drawn to that place. And, I could have gone anywhere. I could have gone and had a new adventure.
Huh.
But I decided to go and have another different, but, same adventure in the same place that I always go. And, it's when you were saying that, I thought, oh, isn't that really nice? I always just go to the same place because I know I like it. And I'm thinking, yes, I think you're totally right. We don't always have to be doing new things. We don't always have to be pushing ourselves to do something different. But I think there is also that kind of if we always go for comfort, then we never challenge ourselves. So I suppose it comes back to this kind of place of, yes, I think on the whole we do want less. We need less stimulation. We need less pushing, less, of listening to the world telling us that we have to do whatever it thinks we should do when we should actually be listening to ourselves and what our needs are. But I think, also growth does come with that challenge. So, when can we challenge ourselves? I don't like the word should, but, are there times where perhaps it would do us good to challenge ourselves, even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable at the time? But I also think, you can do the same thing in a different way. And that is also a way of challenging ourselves. So, I might have done the same walk, starting from the same place, today, but I did it in a different way because there was snow and ice and I took a sledgehammer with me. So, it was, I should probably explain that the loch was icy and I had to take the sledgehammer to smash through it, just in case anyone is thinking that I carry sledgehammers around everywhere and that's a normal thing in Scotland. It generally isn't. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think, my word for last year was balance. I'm not quite sure what this year's word is yet. Maybe you can help me find one. But last year was very much balance because, I had come out of 3 and a bit years of being ill with long COVID where, I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And it sucked and I couldn't push myself. It was very much, doing very little, and, there was joy, there were smiles in there, especially as things started to improve. But, it was then I got into this place of great, I can do all the things, everything is wonderful, push. I need to get my fitness back. I want to do this, There were so many years where I couldn't do things that I'm going to make use of every single hour to do all the things that I missed out on for those years because, I have my life back and it's wonderful. And, it was, and it was awesome. But I think it was also then this kind of okay, there has to be balance. So yes, we should push and challenge ourselves. And, for me, that was a lot of exercise. I was working a job that I loved. I was building my own business. I was doing the podcast. I was doing all of these things. It was busy, lots of exercise adventures, trips going away. We bought the camper van. So it was we were away every weekend. And it was amazing. And getting away into nature is a way that I find myself totally relaxing as well.
Yeah.
But it was building in that kind of balance of, being away and being at home. So, go away for sure. Let's get out in the van. Let's go do all these things. But we do need a weekend occasionally where we're at home and we can do the washing and, take the bins out, do those sorts of things. And then, the sort of work and play balance. I've never been very good at that one. So it's kind of okay, you know, particularly when I'm doing a job that I love and I care about and is mine, you know, there's that kind of like desire to do more and push, you know, again. So it was okay knowing to do things, but also when to let that go. You know, that email doesn't matter right now. I need to turn it off. I need to put my auto response on, and I need to go away for the weekend, or I need to have a week off, or I need to not look at emails on Christmas Day. You know, all of these sorts of things that we feel ourselves wanting to do. Yeah, the balance as well between, you know, pushing myself physically. So, you know, really challenging myself, you know, pushing myself, doing big days out, doing big long runs, big long cycles, massive days in the hills, you know, great, you know, that's awesome. But I also need to have those days where I go and sit on the beach and have a wee swim, you know, or I sit and read a book and listen to the wind, or, you know, whatever. It's that kind of, balance that I've never really found in my life before, because I've been so busy pushing for this perfection that didn't exist, that, you know, you forget to enjoy what you're doing along the way, you know, and if you're not getting any enjoyment from it, then why are you doing it?
Yeah.
And I think it's this kind of thing, you know, life needs to be enjoyable, you know, because stuff is going to come along and disrupt it. And we're going to have to deal with that when it comes.
Yeah.
So for goodness sake, enjoy the bits that are good. Don't cover them up with perfection or whatever. You know, perfection obviously is very much for me, but, you know, I think we've all got different drivers that maybe are taking over our lives in ways that aren't particularly healthy. And it's always good to just reflect on that, isn't it? And say, okay, does this need to kind of encroach on every aspect of my life? And where is it pushing me in ways that actually aren't authentically me, and that aren't serving me? And what can I do to start to let go of some of that? And it's not easy, and it doesn't happen all in a one-hour. And it might be that you need some support with it, a coach or a therapist, or, you know, someone who can kind of be on that journey with you.
Yeah.
But I think it is worth doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's entirely worth doing, because we're looking after ourselves in the end, right? Like you said, putting on the oxygen mask for ourselves and doing what it takes to essentially grow, but without that expectation of everyone else of, oh, is that plant growing yet? Is like, can we harvest it already? But one of the things that I'm curious about, real quick, you went to Torredon whenever you were recovering from your long COVID stint, right?
I did go out there a bit. And I think when I was there, a lot of Torredon is, the mountains are very big and very grand. And they look incredible from the car. But having been up there, I was very much feeling the loss, I suppose, of not being able to be up there because I was ill. So, you know, I remember I was talking to my partner and I said something like, you know, the place that I most want to be, or, you know, if I were better now, the first thing I would do would be go up that mountain. That is the place that I would go first. You know, if long COVID magically went away, this moment, I would get in the car, I would drive there, and I'd go up and do that mountain. That's what I would do. I mean, when you're talking about things like that, you can be completely unrealistic, can't you? You know, it's completely hypothetical. But it was just the place that I wanted to go the most. So, there was something about that whole area. And you know, I think lots of people, you know, most people have places that mean something to them, and I don't know why that place resonates with me so much, but it does, and it's just always the first place that I think of. And maybe you're right that's for whatever reason, that's where I go. You know, when I feel like I need something, but I'm not sure what. You know, I know that I'll find it there.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're Tir Nanog of sorts. Your own land of eternal youth, if you will. So, we never know what's kind of influencing us. And at the same time, we kind of know what we want. And I love that you're saying that we need to do less to get more, and we need that balance. But I think that that's kind of the weird part, right? Because there's balance, and it's like, okay, well, everything looks like it's level, but the scale is still off and something still doesn't feel right. And someone I spoke to before, they said that balance is one thing and then harmony is another. And I was like, oh, well, what exactly is that? And so it's where things can be out of balance or in balance, but if they're not building on top of each other, then it's not really in harmony, because you have to do this and then it takes away from this, you know? And so we want to try to find that thing that you don't have to choose one or the other. They just kind of merge. And I think that that's the hard part, because we're all trying to live all these other people's expectations of ourselves while also trying to figure ourselves out. So do you feel like you've really got a grasp of Jackie now? Do you feel like Jackie has come to make her grand debut, like back in the past or something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm closer than I was. I think it's interesting because when I was ill with long COVID, I think I most of the time believed that I would get better. There were some pretty dark times in there where, things did feel completely hopeless. But I think, they were kind of, they were dips where I would then come back to, okay, everything really sucks right now, but that person has got better. That person has got better. That person is better than they were. So I think I was always, or most of the time, was holding on to that kind of belief that I would get better, especially once I started finding things that helped. And I think I saw recovery, whenever it happened and whatever it looked like, as this kind of like end game. So I thought, when I'm recovered from long COVID, everything is going to be perfect. Life is going to be good. I'm going to be, kind of oven ready, and I think I genuinely thought that right up until the point where I was like, I'm better. And then, for a wee bit after that, I was kind of like, yeah, everything is really wonderful, because it had been so terrible for so long, and I really did feel like I smelled of roses and, rainbows everywhere. It's just amazing. And I'm not sure that I'm going to say the bubble burst as such, but I think it was kind of over time that I realized, again, it's maybe coming back to that perfectionism thing, that nothing is ever perfect, and that life fluctuates. Like stuff happens, normal, hesitate to use the word normal because what even is normal, but normal in hefty quotation marks, life. People have good days, people have bad days, people have days where they're indifferent, people have days where they're totally uninspired and flat, people have days where they wake up and they've had a sleep and they want to kick things, people have days where they fight with their partner for no reason, and then they have days where the best thing in the world happens, and it's like it fluctuates, and that is normal. That is life. And I think the important thing, and the thing that I learned from my long COVID journey, was what is important isn't what happens; it's how we respond to it. Because we know that is going to happen. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know what the story is going to be. But we know that there are going to be days or periods in our life where things don't feel great. So it's important that how we respond to that, and the tools that we have to deal with it. And coming back to your question about have I found myself, I think it was realizing that when I recovered from long COVID, that was actually the start of a new journey. So that was my journey back to health. And then it was kind of the journey to who am I now? And some of that I worked out kind of through the end of my journey, was, I think, and part of the turning point for me was realizing that I didn't want to go back to the job that I was doing, because, it wasn't really me. It was a job, and I liked some aspects of it and I didn't like other aspects of it, but it wasn't me. It didn't light me up. And I'm somebody who needs to be doing something that lights me up. Some people aren't. My partner finds his job okay. And he seems to be totally fine with that. But for me, I'm someone who needs to be inspired. Otherwise, I just get so bored. I need to be doing something that I love. But, other side of that is that doing something I love also pushes me into sometimes pushing myself more than I should. So again, it's kind of finding that balance. So I think it's this whole new journey of who am I? And each day I get a little bit clearer on that. Each day I get slightly better at putting in boundaries that stop me falling into who I'm not and allow me to be who I am, like saying no to things that I don't want to do, which I'd never done before. I didn't realize that it was okay to say no to things that you didn't want to do. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?
No.
But, it was even something like if someone said, oh, do you want to go to the pub tonight? I would be like, oh, yeah, sure. I didn't want to go to the pub. I hate pubs. They're loud and noisy and you can't have a conversation with anyone and everyone's drunk. I hate pubs. I would much rather sit outside and have a picnic with somebody or, meet them somewhere quieter. I don't want to be in a big group with a whole load of people. It's horrible. But, I just did it because it was what you did. Whereas now I'm like, no, I don't want to go to the pub. Or, can we go for a walk instead? Or let's get a coffee somewhere. Or actually, no, this person isn't that important this week, so no, I don't want to see them, and it's not being rude, it's just putting you first. And I think, people are very surprised when you start doing that. You suddenly go from this position where you're a people pleaser and you say yes to everything, and then you start thinking about things before you say yes. And sometimes you will say yes because it's things you genuinely want to do, but sometimes you're like, no, or I'd like to, but it needs to be next week, or could we do it this way? Just starting to actually think about what our needs are. And I think, coming back to, when you were talking about sort of balance versus harmony, and I thought what was really interesting about that, I think, yes, we need to find balance within ourselves, but also we don't exist in isolation. Nothing in our bodies exists in isolation. We change our breathing and it changes our heart rate, which changes our immune function, which influences our inflammation. Everything within our body has a knock-on effect to another part of our body. But, we don't exist in isolation. So everything that I do has a knock-on effect to my partner, which has a knock-on effect, sort of domino effect. So, we can feel like, I'm really in harmony with myself, but something's really off with someone else that you're close to. And it feels off, and we can, I suppose, again, it comes back to, we can look after ourselves because that's the only thing we can do.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, we could do that quote unquote perfectly. We could be doing a really good job of getting good sleep and eating well and exercising enough, but not too much, and doing our breathing practice in the morning. And don't forget to meditate and get outside at lunchtime and, all of these things that are important. But something else might happen that comes along, whether it is something that's going on in the world or whether it's something that happens to someone you care about, or even it's just that you wake up and the sun isn't shining, that can make us feel different, and, we can't control everything, which is terrifying to someone like me who is a bit of a control freak. But the harder we try to control things, the more stressed we become. And the more stressed we become, actually, the harder it is to control anything, because then everything starts spinning out, doesn't it? Yeah. So it's kind of, I guess, coming back to that thing of actually often what we need is less control. Let it go. Less trying, find enough. It's a really hard thing to do, though, when, it's how you've been all your life.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And I have to agree with everything you just said. And forgive me for my brain coming up with this weird metaphor of sorts, but whenever you said something about the bubble didn't burst, my brain was like, okay, well, bubbles, they usually can expand until they do burst, right? But whenever we're looking at life, it also goes back right to what you were talking about. Everything's correlated. Everything's connected in some weird way. So in a weird sense, life is just a bubble bath. and we're going from bubble to bubble, you know? And so it's weird. Like, we want to stick in our bubble. Like, we get comfortable with the bubble that we either grew up in, or we're told that that's our bubble. And we're like, no, we can see a bubble over there that looks more like home, but we don't even maybe know what home really feels like, because we may not have had that experience before. And how do you know, how do you figure something out that you've never experienced before, you know? Because it's kind of like getting hit with COVID or long COVID. You don't experience it until you're in the middle of it, and no one wrote a manual of how to survive it. So you just kind of had to figure it out on your own, right?
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, I think even if someone were to try and write a manual for it, it wouldn't be that simple, because everyone is different, and therefore everyone's journey is going to be different. Now, that's not to say that there's a hell of a lot of commonalities and, you know, kind of different, you know, we look at this and we look at, you know, kind of thing, you know, and I think that's where it's worth looking at people who have recovered and working with coaches who do have that lived experience. Because as you just said, you know, you don't understand long COVID until you've had it. You know, and that gives you insight into other sort of similar conditions. You know, I'm not saying that I would understand, you know, I don't think you can ever fully understand what's going on in someone else's body because you're not in it. But I think it also does give you a lot of insight into other people who are struggling. And I think, you know, what this experience has given me is more empathy and more understanding of the fact that you don't understand. So I would never presume to understand anyone else's experience. I would ask them to tell me, you know, explain to me, or, you know, but also because I'm coming from that position of having experienced it, there are certain things where they don't need to explain. So I think it's that kind of, I get it on a level. Now tell me what it is for you that I find is useful.
So whenever you're dealing with your COVID and stuff, and long COVID and then recovery, you were talking about having to essentially find a new identity because you're not the Jackie that you were before. And part of me wonders, because a lot of us like to do comparisons, which is unfair to ourselves and others. But one of the things is that for myself in my healing journey, I found that I put a lot of stock in my identity in the pain I was experiencing, you know? And so whenever it was like, hey, let's go heal, let's be on this recovery journey, part of me was like, I want to hold on to that pain, because what do I do without it? Like, who am I without this pain? Because it's such an integral part of me. And letting that go was hard. And sometimes it still is, because that pain can just be anger as well towards things that I can't control. How did you manage that kind of identity shift? What kind of parts did you find yourself stuck in that you're like, oh, that doesn't serve me anymore, I need to let it go?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I think, you know, actually our brains, the way that our brains are wired, we will choose familiar pain over unfamiliar pleasure.
Damn.
It's that familiarity. Which is exactly what you just described, right? So it's that kind of, you know, when we understand that is what our brain kind of do, we can then start to say, okay, I see this, you know, awareness is always step one, right? I'm aware of the fact that I'm doing this, I'm falling into this pattern, or I'm doing that thing. Okay, now I can catch myself when I'm doing it. Now I can start to find some strategies that help me, whatever they are. You know, and everyone's going to be slightly different as to what they are. You know, breathing's always a good start. And then, you know, we start to put new patterns in place, new habits, you know, that start to, you know, so that actually they start to feel more familiar. So we don't need to go over there because this is starting to feel a little bit more familiar. So, you know, maybe if I started going other places, I'd feel happier there. But coming back to your question of identity, I think you're very right. And, you know, when you become unwell, or, you know, whichever identity you shift into, for me, it was the long COVID community. And I was very resistant to join it to start with. You know, my partner suggested, you know, maybe there's a support group. Maybe you should join that, because they understand.
Yeah.
And I sort of said, I don't want to do that because it sounds really depressing. And, he was right and he was wrong, and I was right and I was wrong. I think there is tremendous value in community, and of, people who do understand, or understand things that you then don't have to explain. If I'm talking to someone with long COVID, there is a certain level of understanding that there isn't with someone who's never had that experience. They don't understand, that some days I can't lift my head off the pillow, and some days I may look normal, even though I don't feel normal. So there's so many things. And, I'm fully recovered now, and I don't have that experience anymore, but I do understand it because I've been there. But, so I think, things like support groups and communities can be incredibly valuable because you feel understood, you feel validated, where you often don't in the quote unquote normal world, particularly with something that is a sort of invisible illness, something like long COVID, so many other experiences as well. But obviously that's the one that I've had. You do feel invisible because you may well look pretty okay. There's nothing visible there. And on the days that are really bad, no one sees you because you're in bed and you can't lift your head off the pillow. So no one's going to see that bit where you're really, really bad. But also because it fluctuates so much, people don't believe it. Like, well, you were fine yesterday. Well, yeah, I'm in bed today because I was pretending to be fine yesterday. So this kind of identity, it does have a huge amount of validation. I think the problem comes when it's kind of, I hesitate to use the word positive and negative because it's not that simple. But, when it's a community that is like, okay, what can we do? Then I think that can be helpful. When it's a community of everything is so terrible, and which again we love to do, don't we? We love to moan, and I think people need space for that. I think it's important because we have to allow our feelings out. Yeah. Exactly. If we bottle up our emotions, which we're very good at doing in the UK, that's really harmful. So if I'm sad, I need to cry. If I'm angry, I need to hit something. It's like we got to let that out somehow. Some people like journaling, which is better than hitting things. But whatever it is that you find to express yourself, it's important to do that. But I think what we also need to be mindful of is, firstly, when we're doing that, how it's impacting other people. So if I need to rant, I maybe need to check that my partner's okay to listen to that, for example. Or maybe I should save it up for my therapist tomorrow, rather than let it all go on my partner. But also being aware of how other people's ranting and venting and expressing themselves can affect us. Because if we are seeing someone else who's having an absolutely dreadful day, we're going to get drawn in by that. So I think it works both ways. We've got to be conscious of how what we're doing affects others, but also how what others do affects us. And that's where those boundaries come back, right? I'm really sorry you're having a terrible day. I can't deal with this right now because I'm also struggling. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you someone who's caring for yourself and actually in turn caring for them, because, they're then going to feel terrible if you crash because they've, put your own oxygen mask on first. So I did find community useful in some ways, but I had to be very mindful about which ones were the right ones for me. So I did a whole lot of unfollowing Facebook support groups and, then started following the right things, the things that were right for me, finding the right podcasts, finding the right people to talk to, finding the right coaches, the right strategies, the right, all of these things. But, I had long COVID. I was one of the long COVID gang. It wasn't a gang I ever wanted to be a member of, but it was the gang that I was in. So I was one of them. I'd found my place. Wasn't happy about it, but I'd found my place. And then when I got better, or when I started to get better, I still belonged there, but I also was starting to look forwards. And I think a big part of moving out of an illness like long COVID or an experience like this is the looking forward, right? It's like, okay, what could life be like? What is the sort of realm of possibility, where we start to think forwards rather than so stuck in where we are. You know, it's that trying the new jacket on for size. You know, you're not ready to wear it yet, but what does it feel like? What might it look like, kind of thing. And you know, when I moved out of the long COVID space and into whatever the new space was, I found that terrifying because I didn't belong anywhere. You know, I didn't belong in the long COVID space anymore because I didn't have long COVID. I was better. But I didn't feel like I belonged in the real world either, because the real world did not understand the experience that I'd had. So I felt very sort of ungrounded in terms of lost. I didn't have a tribe anymore. And I think over time, like, you know, I've been recovered now for a bit over 2.5 years now, I think. Yeah. And in that sort of 2.5 years, you know, I couldn't put a date on it. I think, you know, over time, I feel like I belong in the real world more than I did before. You know, I think I sort of feel like I not only belong here, but actually that I have a right to be here. Whereas I think before I got sick, I just sort of was getting drifted along by the tide, and, you know, I was doing things because I should and being pushed places by people. And, you know, I was a bit just, floating with the tide. Whereas now I sort of feel like I have more of an anchor, or I go places because I want to go places. Or sometimes I do want to be allowed to drift along, and that's okay. So I think that kind of like, I don't belong here thing has shifted. But what I did also find tremendously useful, and I still love these conversations now, is conversations with other people who've recovered. Yeah. Because I think that is my tribe. You know, the real world is a great place to be. I don't know if real world is the right word, but, you know, the kind of, I'm going to use it because I can't think of a better one, you know, and that's great because, you know, I don't have to explain anything. You know, I belong here, you know. You just have conversations with people. You don't have to go through the whole history unless you want to. You know, it's like, it's just life. Yeah. But those people who have also been through a long COVID recovery or MECFS or, you know, something relatable, you can have those conversations with them again, where you don't have to explain anything. You don't have to worry about offending anyone. You can, you know, talk about things that you can't talk about with anyone else because no one else has had that experience of, you know, the life before the illness, moving out of the illness, and life now. So, you know, there's that kind of other community of people who have come through it. And, you know, that's a really cool conversation to have with people. And, you know, I have it all the time on the podcast when I interview recovery stories. And, you know, it's like, you're my people, you know, and we don't need to spend all of our time together. We don't need to have big, long conversations all the time. It's just knowing that there are people out there that, like, you know, you can be like, hey, you know, you're one of me, and I'm going to go and enjoy time now with people who aren't one of me, because people are cool. Not all of them, but, you know, people I choose to spend time with are cool. But, you know, again, I guess it's that balance, isn't it? Balance between your tribe, you know, the people that just get you without a second thought, and then people who were a little bit different. And that's awesome because, you know, if I spent all my time with myself, oh my goodness, I would drive myself insane. Like, I would hate to spend time with myself all the time, or someone who was really, really like me. It would drive me absolutely nuts. But it's really awesome to have this conversation sometimes. Whereas actually someone like my partner, who is very, very different to me, like, he's great because he grounds me. You know, he's so different to me that actually it works. Like, that whole opposites attract thing, like, I think there's something there, you know. So, you know, I mean, I think coming back to that, you know, have I found myself? I think I'm not sure anyone ever 100% does. I think it's a lifelong journey. I know myself a lot better than I ever have before. You know, I think I'm much more me than I've ever been. I'm happier and healthier, I think, than I've ever been, except for my foot. But that's work in progress. You know, that's just a normal injury that's annoying, but you know, give it another few weeks and it'll be fine. So it's that kind of yeah. You know, I'm kind of excited to see who Jackie's going to become, but you know, she's on that journey that you know everyone is, and it's exciting if we let it be, I think.
Ooh, let it be. So we got to allow the journey to happen. We can't sit there and attack it.
I know. I think that's the thing, isn't it? You know, it's letting go and allowing rather than pushing and forcing, which is hard.
Yeah, it's really hard because we're just taught the exact opposite in growing up. You know, a lot of the time it's
practice
go, do. Yep. And it's something that I think a lot of us just fall into the trap of and never really see that way out. You know, I think the bubble bath just got someone threw in a bath bomb and it's all like that, just super glittery. And it's like, crap, can't see past this bubble. But
glitter bubbles, that sounds awesome. I want one of them.
They're a little weird, let me tell you. But
you should do them as podcast merch. Glitter bath bombs.
That would be pretty cool.
It would be pretty cool.
Real quick, you still are able to be found on longcovidpodcast.com, correct?
I am, yes.
So you still do your podcast, you do interviews, and you still help people do all the breath work and stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. So the podcast is still going. Actually, I published episode 200 last week. Wow. So I'm not very good at patting myself on the back, but I'd quite like to put my hand up to that one. Like that felt...
Heck yeah.
200 is quite a big number.
So
I'm still doing that. Working as a breath coach, work with people helping with the nervous system and emotional regulation. Basically, whatever you need. You know, I think... You know, what I wanted to be was what I needed. And it took me a while to find out what that was. And it's been a super exciting journey to find it. But everyone's different. And it's like, okay, let's find your path. Let's get into you and work out what you need. And that's it's cool. It's the best job ever because, you know, I get to talk to awesome people and help them.
Yeah. That's awesome. And congratulations on episode 200. And here's to another 200 plus, you know, because what was it? I heard all these statistics and it was like, there's millions of podcasts out there. And they were like, but only X% are still active. And so that dropped the number down to like in the hundreds of thousands. And it's like, only so many are past episode 100 as well. And so it's like, I think in the 1% or like 10% of all podcasts ever. So you're up there. So congratulations. That's a hard achievement to get because it's a lot of perseverance. And I mean, sometimes we have to push through even whenever it doesn't feel fun, you know, but we can't sit there and tell ourselves that it's got to be perfect. But I know that's where I started off. And boy, looking back at some of the episodes are like, why did anyone listen to this in the first place?
But the other thing is, you know, they were practice for now. You wouldn't be who you are now if you hadn't have done what you did then. So, you know, I think it's like, you know, it's the same with the mistakes that we make is what makes us good. We don't, you know, we learn so well through mistakes, don't we? I think we learn better through mistakes than anything else. So, I try to look at it that way. When things go wrong, we're rehearsing for when they're going to go right.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. Because, the School of Hard Knocks is the way that I've learned the best and really understood the lessons. But sometimes I wish I didn't have to. But now I get to use that experience to help other people either get through the same thing, you know? And so you get to do the same thing with your podcast and everything. And it's just amazing work that you're doing out there. So thank you for doing all that. But real quick, Jackie, we are near the end of this episode. So do you think you're ready for our game show segment?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So everyone out there and Jackie, our game today is called The Pulse and the Pause. I'm going to give Jackie two options, the pulse versus the pause. And she has about 10 seconds to pick one and give a reason why. Jackie, no depends. It's just one or the other with a reason. You ready?
I'll do my best.
All right. Up first, box breathing or alternate nostril breathing?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
It is.
I'm going to go for, I would have given a different answer a few years ago, but I'm going to go for box breathing.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because when I was ill, it did not work for me. It was terrible, terrible. And I would not recommend box breathing to people with long COVID. But I actually really like it now. It actually, I find it's quite, the counting helps when my mind is starting to run away from itself.
Oof. Ooh, that's a good reason. Okay. So what about cold water plunge or a sauna sweat?
Definitely cold water. We
Cold
have a
water.
lot of water in Scotland, so practically it's the smart choice. But there's also, you can't beat that feeling of getting out of cold water. I mean, when you get out of, especially, I was in ice cold water. It was literally freezing as fast as I could smash it up today. And you get out and, your legs look like Heinz tomato soup. That kind of like really orangey kind of color. Like, go do your cold water and then look at the color of your legs and you'll know what I mean. But you get such a buzz out of it. You come out and you feel like you could conquer the world. It takes, my mind when it's racing, you can't overthink when you're in the water. It just takes you out of that and the stress floats off. And I just love it.
Huh. Oh, wow. Okay. What about a quiet morning or a starry night?
Oh, now that is a hard one because I love nice mornings. But I'd probably go for a starry night if I had to choose, because there is something. I mean, sunrises are amazing. I love sunrises and sunsets, but the stars, I feel like they have so much magic to them. I think that magic comes from what we don't understand. And I feel like I understand sunrises and sunsets more than I understand stars. Yeah. And, when I was driving home this evening, it was beautiful and starry. And I just kept wanting to stop and, just look up there. When you can lie on the ground and just look up there and try and draw like little pictures out of them. And, I believe someone has actually done that already and they're called constellations. But I quite like drawing my own pictures. So I think it's that magic and that awe and that kind of wonder and, the not knowing, but it being okay to look at the sky.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. I love that one. And I'm right there with you. Starry night all the way through. So what about this one? The breath of fire or the cooling Sitali breath, if you know what those are.
Ooh. I think that would depend on the situation, but I'm not allowed to say that. So I do quite like a breath of fire in the morning if I'm feeling a bit lethargic. Again, wouldn't recommend that to someone with long COVID, but I really quite enjoy that now. So I maybe would pick that one.
All right. What about social connection or deep solitude?
I feel like I'm not very good at either of them.
Ooh. So they're both a challenge.
Yeah, they are both a challenge. But again, I'm not allowed to say that. I have to make a choice. I'm not very good at choosing. Like if I'm in a shop and I'm like, do I want this chocolate or that chocolate? I'll buy both. Do you want this drink or that drink? I'll take both. Either or is a really hard game for me. I would probably, if I was allowed to pick where, I would take solitude.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
So long as it could be like in nature.
Yeah, I was about to say you like going up to the mountains, so sounds about right.
Yes. But then, I go out to the mountains and I was walking on my own, but I still bumped into other people. So I don't know if that counts as solitude, but,
I think that really depends on the mindset, right?
Yeah.
Because you can be alone in a room full of people, right?
That's very true. Yeah.
So.
Yes. And what is it people say about actually the most lonely people are often people that live in the busiest cities? That kind of loneliness whilst being surrounded by a load of other people that don't notice you or don't care about you or that you can't connect with or whatever.
Yeah, that's a whole nother level of depression we can talk about next time.
Maybe that's next time.
Yeah. And last one for right now, digital detox or nature immersion.
Oh, nature immersion. I mean, I would say that by doing nature, you are kind of doing a digital detox anyway. But
yeah, true. I mean, but you can bring your phone with you, be worried about taking all the perfect pictures, you know, and everything. So leave the phone in the van if you go on nature.
Yeah.
Got it.
Or put it on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yes, all right. It's there if you need it, but you're not constantly checking Facebook.
Yeah, because last time we spoke, we talked about how once you check that message from that one person, you just start scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and you never hit the end.
You get sucked in, don't you? That dopamine, you're never going to get the dopamine hit from Facebook because it never ends.
Yeah. All right, Jackie. Thank you for playing the Pulse versus the Pause. And because of your wonderful answers and because you're just doing all this breath work, we have decided to bestow you the honorary title of the Navigator of the Sovereign Breath for all the work that you do. So, is there any last words that you have for our audience this, well, for me, it's afternoon. For you, it's evening. So,
oh, I don't know. I think you've had enough words from me, haven't you? I think, you know, I might have said earlier that I would probably choose the going off on my own. I can't remember the words used, and not connecting with people. But I think that's because I spend a lot of my life connecting with people, and that is such a great thing. You know, I think one of the biggest silver linings from a really, really experience was that I connected with so many people, you know, people that I don't know and will never know, and people that I do know, people who comment on things, people who email me, people who I've worked with professionally, people who I now call friends and colleagues. You know, it's like connecting, or people like yourself. You know, and it's like connection is so important, and you know, I think we often lose that when we become unwell, and I think it's something that is incredibly important. So it's been amazing connecting, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been amazing connecting with you again, Jackie, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. And I mean, it's just going to be another rabbit chase, and I'm excited to see what holes it goes into this time.
Me too. So. It'll be really interesting. I don't think we'll know until it happens.
Yeah. And I think that's the best kind of conversations. So
totally.
Everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. And as always, try to love yourself, love others if you can, but you got to love yourself first. And if you're having a mental health crisis, you can call 988 or text 741-741 if you don't feel like talking to someone. And I mean, just try to not be perfect, but just find you and be your favorite version of yourself. And maybe you'll find something that you lost long ago. So with that being said, this has been Jackie, this has been Keegan, and we'll see you next time. But until then, much love. Schlan!